And a bad morning to everyone. Um, this is bad morning news. Um, just a light explanation for what this is for the people who haven't seen an episode yet. I posted the test episode, episode 1, yesterday, and I made the Facebook page, so y'all can head over there and like that. I'll be making the Twitter for it relatively soon as well. So these will be accessible by multiple parties who become affiliated with the project. Um, and these sorts of things will all contain the links to these episodes, so you'll be able to get a full social media experience for this show on its own. And also these things will be hubs for like the creators' individual content. So if this show is successful, people who are affiliated with it will be more successful as well. So I like to think that we can sort of elevate each other. But either way, this is fucking the 18th of July. And we are sitting here about to start this episode of Bad Morning News, which is a news show designed to be your antidote to mainstream media's butter yellow couches, fucking pleasant, nice morning news designed to get you to be a cog in the machine. We want you to break free of that machine, so we're going to tell you how shit it is. And with very few exceptions, we'll be bringing up like the worst of the worst as we can find it, without losing veracity or whatever. But that being said, let's get some housekeeping in order. This is brought to you by Brave, the ad-resistant, tracker-resistant browsing experience that supports creators directly through its own cryptocurrency known as the Basic Attention Token. If you want to go support this show and get a better browsing experience for free, go over and get Brave, and you can do both of those at the same time. Plus, you can get a wallet and support creators who participate in the Brave program directly, because something will pop up when a creator is supportable by BATs. So consider doing that. I would very much appreciate any one of you who does that. Same with the Cash App, who supports this show by giving us $5 to get us to download the app and send $5. It will give you $5 back, and it will give us $5 in return for getting you interested in the thing, even though that was a really terrible way to phrase it, and I know that because I'm fucking groggy still a little. Caffeine is not quite kicked in. So that, Liberty Mugs, and the Crypto tab are all what supports this sort of show continuing. Also, anything else in the description. So feel free to do that. Would very much appreciate it. Just for the first week, I'm going to get Lupinit to introduce himself, let people know where he can be found, and then we'll jump into the show, because after that point, you should know us relatively well, and this sort of introduction takes like time that we could be worsening your day. So without further ado, let's get to that.
Hi, I'm Lupinate. You can find me on Minds and Discord under Lupinate, or on Steam as an Arctic Wolf. And let's just crack on, I think, to be honest, mate.
Yeah, okay. All right, so let's start, actually, because I've got a ton of stories about American police here. I'll start with this relatively dark story, sort of an opposite of a human interest story, about these American police who like stood around and laughed as fellow cop tortured handcuffed man with a taser. So I'll read that story, and then you can jump into the ineffective British policing story that you racked up for last time. And I think we can, I think we should really rail on police today, because I think that's a good way to get people into what the show is going to be about. So
if we can also do the FBI.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Fuck all feds. So this is from the freethoughtproject.org. It says Watch, cops stand around and laugh as fellow cop tortures handcuffed man with a taser. Disturbing surveillance footage has been released showing a cop torment a young man with a taser as other cops stand around and laughed. Stood around. They did the proper grammar. I didn't. Floyd County, Georgia. A Georgia man and his mother are planning to sue the Floyd County Sheriff's Department after their son was tased and tortured while in police custody, and the disturbing incident was captured on video. In 2017, Juan Porter asked a motorist to call the police and claimed he had been attacked by 4 men. Upon arrival, instead of hunting for the perpetrators, the officers arrested the man, who was 21 at the time, for being drunk. When he was taken to the Floyd County Jail, Porter reportedly became belligerent and was subsequently tased while inside his holding cell. But that wasn't what caused Porter's mother, Felicia Curry, to become upset, so much as what happened after Porter was removed from his jail cell. One of the deputies stood behind Porter as he was signing some paperwork for his release and dry-fired his taser in an attempt to scare and intimidate Porter. Sergeant Matthew Battle, who had just tasered Porter in his cell, triggered the taser multiple times in an effort to incite fear. The not-so-funny incident caused the other deputies to laugh with delight, but Curry isn't laughing. She says her son has been traumatized by the whole experience. It's outrageous, said Curry. Porter filed an official complaint shortly after the incident, which prompted the jailer to call for an immediate investigation. The Georgia State Bureau of Investigation opened an official misconduct investigation into the alleged torturous incident, which was no laughing matter for the family. In the end, one officer, Sergeant Battle, was fired. Battle was a 14-year veteran of the police department and was the one behind the crude treatment of Porter. Pulling the trigger on the taser, Corporal Kerry Edge issued the following statement. Sorry, I missed the period. It's one of those news situations where you're reading a thing and you just don't see that punctuation. Pulling the trigger on the taser. Corporal Kerry Edge issued the following statement in February 2017 upon the release of the GBI findings. She said, "Our administration continues to keep assurance of public trust as a prime concern of our office. Whether it involves a 14-year veteran like Mr. Battle or a new deputy just beginning his career, misconduct of any kind will not be tolerated. The sheriff's office will continue to do the right thing even when it means exposing our shortcomings." Curry claims her son suffered permanent mental injuries, not only from the tasing, but also from being taunted by the police with additional torture. Now, over a full year later, the jailhouse video of the incident has been made public. While the video does not show Battle tasing Porter because it happened inside the cell, the video does reveal how Battle dry-fired his taser while standing behind Porter as he was at the administrative desk. The sound of the taser can be heard along with the laughter brought about by the insensitive humor some might say resembles mental and emotional torture. So there's a little bit more, and you can watch the video, which is brought to you by, looks like, their local CBS outlet. But yeah, it's a relatively sobering thought that maybe these cops are in it because they like hurting people and not because they're actually trying to keep anyone safe. Because this guy was just drunk. He didn't even hurt anybody. It's a victimless crime to begin with, but then let's add to that the fact that he was electrocuted and then threatened and taunted with electricity even more after that.
I mean, from my view, I'm actually quite glad of the resolution that actually has come out of it, because from other reports that have happened in the past, there have been many instances where no misconduct would have been filed. And it just would have been brushed under the table. If it wasn't, I suspect if it wasn't for the fact it was filmed, it probably would have been, it probably would have fallen into that category, unfortunately. But
well, and it certainly would have.
Yeah. I mean, it's happened too many times now to say that it wouldn't, unfortunately. But
also the cops were like behaviorally prone to that. Like, obviously this is something they thought was fine, which probably means that they did it a lot, this sort of thing anyway.
Part of the problem is the training, I think, to be honest, that cops get now, because I've seen some footage of certain police training exercises, and it's almost as if they treat the citizenry in those training exercises as the enemy.
Well,
not
right, and
as
enemy
somebody to
combatant.
protect. Yeah, and policing is not supposed to work that way. It's not everybody is an enemy combatant. It's everybody is your customer,
Right.
and you have to make sure your customers stay alive. That is
Well,
how it's supposed to be.
and in terms of customer relations, that they still want to patronize your business when
Yeah.
like when here they get to like literally just brutalize people, beat them with steel rods so that their muscles contract, and then tell them to relax and stop resisting. Like what like you're gonna beat the fuck out of somebody and then blame them for like quote resisting, and then like tase them as well and their muscles tense up. Well, gee, I wonder why.
Hmm.
Fucking absurd. But let's get to that British
Unfortunately.
policing article just so that people don't think this is a local problem.
No, it's not, because in Britain at the moment it's a slightly different issue in Britain, to be honest. Because, and I'll take this from the Daily Mail, um, published on the 15th of July. Have police lost control? Most Britons think criminals have no fear of the law, as 2/3 say they haven't seen an officer on their street in a year amid soaring crime levels. And the bullet points, to be honest, there is one reason I do like the Mail Online, is it does a nice little synopsis in bullet point form of the
Yeah,
article
well,
you're going to read.
it gives you the
So
bluff.
yeah, it gives you the cliff notes right at the start. It's brilliant. Rates of violent crime have soared to the highest levels ever in the last 2 years. A survey carried out for the Daily Mail reveals Britain's lack of faith in the police. Around 57% of people think most criminals no longer fear being caught. And people use the survey to call for more bobbies on the beat to deal with crimes. Now, personally, I think that solution is uh, basically a band-aid. The problem is more systemic. I'll go into that, though, after the article. Majority of Britons say police have lost control of the streets, a shocking Daily Mail poll reveals today. According to the exclusive survey, 57% of people say officers have surrendered control of our neighborhoods and criminals have no fear of being caught. Amid skyrocketing levels of crime, the poll also reveals that a quarter of the population don't feel safe at night in their local area. And it suggests that one of the biggest factors behind the recent surge in lawlessness is a lack of bobbies on the beat. An incredible 60% of the public say they haven't seen a police officer in their street in the past year. The poll will increase pressure on ministers to get a grip on the violent crime wave engulfing the UK. The poll was phrased as this, and I'm trying to see. It annoyingly, it doesn't give me the numbers polled. So for all I know, this could have been like 20 people. So again, everybody take this with a grain of salt. But of people who were asked, have you seen a police officer on the beat in your street over the past year? 60% said no. Do you feel safe when on the street where you live? During daylight? Yes, 92%. During hours of darkness? Yes, 56%. So massive drop once the street lights go on. In the past 2 years, have you or a member of your household been a victim of crime which was reported to the police? 15% yes. So it's really not a huge issue for most people at the moment. Most people aren't affected by crime right now, as it says. Did a police officer attend your address when you reported this crime? 51% said no. And that's worrying, because if half of incidents or over half of incidents aren't even being seen to by an officer when you call them, then it seems like there's a serious problem with the supply of officers available. Were you asked to gather or submit any evidence such as CCTV footage? No, 66% of the time. Yes, 30% of the time. So only 30% of the time requires evidence to prove the crime.
Well, and isn't that fucking great? Because like it, so if there isn't a universal standard for evidence, then when a cop does supposedly address some sort of criminal issue, the public is just supposed to believe them and their side of it. like,
Precisely.
and that they did anything at all, you know,
Mm.
like, which is what this is about. Like, if they didn't do shit, they can still say they did, and if you don't have to get like the evidence from surrounding cameras, it's a huge inaccountability sink.
Yeah,
And I think
there's
that
a lack of
people,
accountability there.
yeah, well, and not to mention the fact that once you lose that accountability and you get used to being unaccountable, specifically, you stop being ethical. And so,
Yeah.
like, and you know, in the Great Britain, I believe, not only are they not allowed to carry firearms, but they are allowed to carry these like steel batons, and they fucking can break tons and tons of bones in your body. So, like,
There is a special trained group that is allowed to carry firearms for police.
right, well,
Every normal
beat cops.
bobby, beat cops, are not, but they
Right.
do have a number of non-lethal means to subdue their a potential criminal.
Right. But many of those involve just beating the shit out of them with sticks.
Potentially, yes.
So, like, I mean, yeah, you're not allowed to just shoot at them, but that doesn't mean that you can't severely injure them. Fucking
true.
British politics.
It gets worse though. Was the crime solved? No, 63%. To what extent, if at all, was the crime dealt with by the police to your satisfaction? Dissatisfied 43%, satisfied 48%. Don't know 8. For each of the following pairs of statements, which one comes closest to your view? The police, 38% say the police feel like they are on my side with my priorities at heart. 35% say the police increasingly feel as if they have their own politically correct agenda, which does not match my own interests. And 27% said neither, don't know. So it's about a third of the nation is currently feeling, according to this poll, that it's not being served by the police and the police are serving some sort of specific ideological agenda. And then finally, to what extent do you agree, if at all, would you agree or disagree with this statement? Police officers have lost control of our streets and criminals no longer have any fear of being caught and brought to justice. Agree 57%, disagree 30%. And I'll be honest, I don't know if I need to go too much further into that because the poll itself, there we go. Here's the survey was of 2,000 adults conducted for the mail by ComRes and We the People. And some of the questions, they are, if I'm honest, some of those questions are a little bit leading, but most of them are fairly sensible. And the last, or the number 4 through 7, were actually quite reasonable from my perspective. Now, the problem is that in most cases, when it comes to robbery and stuff in Britain, you don't get the goods back. So if you've been robbed, you're screwed. And the only real protection is to get something like a security alarm. Companies like ADT, Optima, they're all over here, and they do provide a very good service for their customers in most cases. If only because when a burglar sees that logo on your wall as part of the system, they will walk on by because they know that's going to be more expensive a target for them to deal with and more risky a target to deal with than anything else on the line. If they can get in quick, yep, they will. If they can't, leave it, move on.
And wouldn't it be great though if like enough of these so-called public institutions were supplanted by things like that, so that when you saw that logo on somebody's window, you knew that they were protected by a group, but that group was also basically the police?
Yeah, I
Like,
know. It'd be nice. And that's the thing. ADT has that kind of relationship with the police in Britain. They have a private contract with them. So
right.
technically, I have on call private police because they're publicly funded as well, but this contract binds them even harder.
Yeah, well, on that level, because I brought this up in multiple places already, and one of the prevailing responses I got was like essentially comparing what I'm suggesting to the Yakuza. And I'm like, well, I mean, maybe a little bit, but I'm not trying to like cover up existing crimes that actually hurt people. I'm not trying to use public trust against the public. What I'm suggesting is that like an organization which wanted to protect people could come and do so, and they could have their logo on certain places, sort of like a brand, like we will protect this group of people because you know you've become a threat to them. And in doing so, I think that deterrence, because I think, oh man, I forget, maybe I'll look this up before next time we come on, but there was a study done, and it was like testing how many people would just stop because they saw a security sign, not even because the security company was legitimate. Like they gave these, they put out these fake security signs, and they tested a place's vulnerability to crime with them and without them, and they found that in most cases, people, even though the company didn't fucking exist, would just move on by. They wouldn't go.
Well, I mean, the
So
one thing is for me, I mean, there is an argument to be made. You need more people on the streets, and they have lost quite a lot of officers due to budget cuts in Britain. But that money has also been repurposed in a lot of cases, not for more officers, but for more technology to, and I can see the argument, but the technology is being used to police hate crimes rather than to police the streets. The systems haven't really advanced that far, and that's why groups like My Local Bobby are building a proper business in Britain. This should not be happening, by the way. If you believed in the state and thought that the state worked, this should not be possible. But, and this is from like May, but there was a group that's basically now rolling out nationwide, following major successes in 3 of London's wealthiest boroughs. Mayfair, it was trialed in Belgravia, Mayfair, and Kensington. So these are really upmarket, affluent areas of London. And they were offering a service that cost £200 a month to protect you and your home. And in most cases, they are retired officers. They've dealt with drunken, disorderly, drug usage. They've even been put onto some cases for criminal cases. They've been applying for the right to be able to do them as well, because the Met Office is openly admitted it's overstretched, and it will take whatever help it can get pretty much on this one if the people behind it have been properly trained. And as I said, these are mostly ex-police officers. So the private security solution works, and the conviction rate of these people, it's like 100%. It's unheard of. So it can work privately. And if these guys do succeed nationally, just imagine what could happen. It could wind up completely changing the dynamic for government.
right, well, and if it did, then it could stand as a model for the globe. That's one of the reasons, by the way, that like I was a strong supporter of Brexit, even though I've never been to Great Britain, because I saw it as a way to be a beacon of hope to people who wanted to get out of toxic political unions. And And this could be a similar thing in that sort of way. Of course, if the story of Brexit is any indication, nobody's actually interested in authentic change enough to actually stick with the results. So, I mean, whatever.
There are
You
a
know,
couple, but at the moment, they're playing the game. I mean, I can recognize. The thing is that if you ever want to know how British politics works and actually works, it's a comedy series, but it's worth watching. It's called Yes Minister, and even better is Yes Prime Minister, because you get to see the two levels of government at play with each other. And I think they're available on Netflix, so I recommend anybody who has it watch it, because it really does work that way. People like to, oh no, it was just a comedy series. No, the reason why it's funny is because it's true. That's the only reason why it's funny.
From what it sounds like, that's like very much something like Parks and Recreations.
It's similar, but less of a situational comedy, more of a political comedy.
Well,
even more political.
Which is one of the reasons I like British comedy. Like in terms of British politics, like comedy specifically, like fucking I like the absurdist sort of but still somewhat concrete stuff. Like for instance, Hitchhiker's Guide.
Yeah.
The Vogan constructor fleets were all designed to look like British politics.
That kind of principle is carried in Yes Minister, because the main character is the Minister for Administrative Affairs. So he's a minister who administrates ministers. And he's in charge of he's in charge of cutting the bureaucracy. And his entire team is basically does everything they can to prevent him from doing any damage to that bureaucracy whatsoever.
Yeah.
If any progress is made, that's a negative to the civil service and a positive to the politician. So the civil service will work against the politician at all times. And it works the same way in the States, and people just don't realize that.
So that sort of reminds me of Fawlty Towers in a way.
It kind of is, because you could look at Fawlty Towers as a badly run business, and any badly run government looks very similar to any badly run business.
Well, and that's the thing. People don't get government is a business. Yeah. Like there's nothing separating government and business in terms of fundamental functions and key decisions made. Like government just runs as a business, which doesn't have to worry exceedingly about a bottom line being maintained or about cutting costs for a more refined product. They can, essentially print whatever they want and get their agenda shoved through. So, but there's still a business. They're just a business that doesn't look like a normal business because, like,
they have a different funding model.
Right. Instead of trying to cut costs to make things smaller, they make budgets that are huge so that they can get nice things for themselves. And then in the end, they get those nice things, and then they have a bunch of fun money left over, so they get them again so that they can fucking justify their budget. Instead of the opposite way around. And so
that's
to be honest, efficiency.
To be honest, budgets always work that way. If you don't spend your budget, you lose your budget.
Well, yeah, except when
that's the thing.
Cut cost and like fire a bunch of people, which barely ever happens in government. And when it does, it's considered a loss of jobs. So the public gets to gasp in horror as the president they thought, or prime minister in this case, that they thought was going to deal with jobs suddenly has lower numbers than they expected, even though that's probably actually fucking good.
True.
Like, I like to think of it this way. For every government job that exists, there's 2 private ones or more that can't exist.
That's probably a fair assessment, at least. Because it's a market that they control. And therefore you lose the ability to make multiple jobs doing the same thing.
Well, right. But it's also the fact that money isn't going there. The money isn't going to private business. The money is going to maintaining essentially a parasitic public sector. And as a result, you can't fund those private businesses to begin with. And as a result, the inflation from funding this, essentially irresponsible system, and by essentially, I mean, like, in essence, irresponsible system, means that when you do start to save up, that next round of QE is going to fuck you over in the end anyway. Like the standard picture of a grocery cart that's like, got a few objects in it, and it says 2018, and then like on the left it's got a grocery basket that was full, and that was like 1962 or something like that. And
well, I mean, you brought up corrupt officials and whatnot in the government. And that just brought me very quickly to that an article from True Pundit about the FBI. Remember the one I shared with you yesterday on Lisa Page?
Oh, yeah. Feel free to read that.
Because people have been focusing on Strzok quite a bit, perhaps, because he's been doing a lot of testimony and he's been towing the line quite well for the deep state. And they seem to have forgotten that there was another party involved with those emails, Miss Lisa Page. And from True Pundit, FBI, Lisa Page dimes out top FBI officials during classified House testimony. Bureau bosses covered up evidence China hacked Hillary's top secret emails. So this should be fun. Former FBI lawyer Lisa Page testified during 2 days of closed-door House hearings, revealing shocking new intel against her old bosses at the Bureau, according to well-placed FBI sources. Alarming new details on allegations of a Bureau-wide cover-up, or should we say another Bureau-wide cover-up. The embattled Page tossed James Comey, Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, and Bill Priestap, amongst others, under the congressional bus, alleging the upper echelon of the FBI concealed intelligence confirming Chinese state-backed assets had illegally acquired former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's 30,000-plus missing emails, federal sources said. The Russians didn't do it. The Chinese did, according to well-placed FBI sources. And while Democratic lawmakers and the mainstream media prop up Russia as America's bogeyman, it was the, ironically, Chinese who acquired Hillary's treasure trove of classified and top-secret intelligence from her homebrewed private server. And a public revelation of that magnitude, publicizing that a communist world power intercepted Hillary's sensitive and top-secret emails, would have derailed Hillary Clinton's presidential hopes overnight. But it didn't because it was concealed. FBI bosses knew of the breach, yet did nothing to investigate, seemingly tried to run out the clock on the alarming revelations to protect Hillary during her heated presidential campaign with Trump. So instead of investigating the hacking of Clinton's servers, FBI bosses sat quietly and did nothing to confirm the Chinese assets were linked to their government, or assess the damage, such as a tremendous breach posed to national security. Did the Chinese government access Hillary's emails? The FBI didn't care enough to investigate at the risk of besmirching the Clintons and further soiling her during the election. Hundreds of top-secret documents and even the president's daily travel and security itineraries were on that server and intercepted by a communist country, yet the FBI sat on the evidence. Likewise, all of Clinton and her inner circle's outgoing emails were compromised as well, sources confirmed. Even the Inspector General had tipped off the FBI, specifically Strzok, about the foreign breach. Still, no timely case was pursued. The same cover-up pattern fits FBI bosses who time after time stalled and concealed other criminal intelligence on Clinton in the weeks prior to the election. We could write more detail here and ramble on, but at this point we simply ask, is anyone going to prison for politicizing the FBI and covering up the countless crimes committed by the FBI personnel in a variety of coordinated schemes to protect Hillary and the Democrats? So I will say this, True Pundit is well known for being extremely right-wing, but from a political perspective, not from anything else. And from my point of view, it's take it with a grain of salt, but I'd say that the data that she gave was probably um, legitimately going to have that kind of problem, if that makes sense. There's a serious issue going on with regards to the FBI, and not just the whole quotas thing that I mentioned yesterday, but it's more to do with how it's being used by
Right.
by different political parties. There is a deep state within the states, and it's particularly a bureaucracy
Right.
combined with lobby groups, which then feed up into um, some very large businesses. And all of those groups together form the deep state. And that entity is freaking out, quite honestly, because it's seeing something that it's been working on for the better part of half a century being torched in an instant by a single man with a floppy haircut.
Well, I
And
mean, maybe.
that's the thing, is whether or not he actually fully torches it or not remains to be seen. But elements of it have been torched. And we'll
Well,
see if they get rebuilt, but I don't see it happening myself. Not right now. There's
but
too many fires.
let's be specific though. A lot of these quote fires are controlled burns, and to think that these sorts of things are being, are being done for the public interest, to think that these sorts of things are being done in an attempt to torch the deep state itself, rather than just like, you know, take away the underbrush so that it doesn't light the bigger proverbial trees on fire. I think that could be naive. I think that realistically, a lot of this stuff is somebody didn't toe the line. They got a whole bunch of other people to not toe the line, and now under the guise of making a freer, more prosperous country, he gets to help a bunch of his buddies throw a bunch of other people under the bus. You know,
Potentially, there is that potential. But the fact that he's trying to develop better ties with Russia at the moment is very promising, because there was a book before the Russian Revolution began that predicted America would work together with Russia to help make Russia more capitalist and become a functioning member of society. And that probably would have happened if it weren't for the revolution and the objection to capitalism entirely. And now that communism has been relinquished for the most part in Russia, there has been a prime opportunity to make that happen. Unfortunately, most people now, or since a number of geopolitical gerrymandering has been occurring, there's been more impetus to treat Russia still as an enemy. But if we treated them as an ally, think how much more productive we could have. They've got shit tons of resource. We could manufacture things much cheaper if they gave us a good deal. It's simple economics, and we just need to accept that and work with these people and try and get them to improve their own societies as a result of getting extensive amounts of capital that they can build with. It's
right.
simple economics.
But then you have to avoid being, the proverbial white savior, even though this isn't, technically differing skin tones. You have to avoid being the solution so that they then rely on you, because that's fucking. There's a song by, I think it was Cold Cut, called Aid Dealer, and it's a relatively, simple way of explaining how essentially uh, a business model will come into a country that is not prepared for it, and its people will still be reliant on the old ways and not culturally changed. So the business will come in, solve their problem, and then just stay. And as a result, the place gets more geared toward that particular model and less geared toward, solving any given problem, and keeping it solved. Because then there's a profit motive. They have like profit motive to maintain their presence in whatever region. And so, yeah, like maybe relations might improve and maybe their economic conditions might improve temporarily, but a lot of the time, their economic conditions improve at the expense of the people actually knowing how to improve it themselves. And so they become reliant on these businesses for everything, pretty much. Or, they just like fucking like the rice that's coming from US aid to all these other countries. They get like, so much rice that they can't manufacture rice anymore. And then they keep on getting rice to the level where rice is being used as like building material and sandbags. So
it becomes valueless.
Right. And so in a similar way, if the US is to help Russia in that way, they have to help by getting the average Russian to be different. And good fucking luck with that. They're very austere. They love their culture. A lot of them are very traditionalist, especially the closer you get to Moscow. And realistically speaking, I don't think you're going to see much change in that particular regard. In the same way that you wouldn't get like a Southerner to stop flying their fucking what's the term for that? I can't remember the term, the slang term for that flag, unfortunately. But
But they are capitalists now, mate. That's the point. They aren't communists anymore.
Maybe
they aren't really that socialist anymore to a large extent. They'd rather. That's why they want less state control over their lives. From my perspective, I've been to a lot of ex-Soviet. Well, I've been to a few ex-Soviet states, I should say, and more importantly, interacted with lots of people who come from that region. And most of the ones who emigrated after the wall fell are diehard capitalists. They are verging. A lot of the smart ones are really verging on anarcho-capitalism to a good extent. You talk to them about politics and they'll laugh very, very quietly to themselves. And then you talk to them about economics. They say, oh, yeah, that's how that works. And then you do this. And they just go crazy. And it's absolutely beautiful to see that the really intelligent people who made it out of that environment are aware and able to distinguish what the reality was to what they've moved to. And it's, for the most part, it's people who are idealists and think that wouldn't it be nice if everyone was nice? That kind of principle. And it unfortunately, not everybody is nice. Some people are really, really nasty. And you've got to accept that.
I mean, I don't want to get lost in the weeds too much on this, but that's exactly like saying, wouldn't it be nice if everyone was anti-statist, and then pointing to some statists and then saying, well, I guess anarchy is impossible.
No, I get that, but there's a slight difference in that one is human nature and one is tradition.
I don't buy human nature arguments. There's plenty of human nature arguments that could be made against any economic system. But before we get lost in the weeds on that, because I think we could talk about that at any point,
Sure.
Maybe we could hit that a little harder later today on Real News Wednesday, which is still going to happen, by the way, for the longtime listeners of this channel. Let's
be able
get
to make that one though.
Okay, well, if you can, I'll still send you the link.
Fair enough.
But just to get back to the corruption itself,
yeah,
I'm going to read this other article from Free Thought Project. It says the largest voting machine vendor in U.S. admits its systems had remote access software installed. After denying that their voting systems came with remote access software, the country's largest voting machine vendor had just come clean. A bombshell revelation on the security of voting in the United States has just surfaced in the form of a letter from the country's largest voting machine manufacturer. The company, Election Systems and Software (ES&S), admitted that despite denying previous allegations of its voting systems coming installed with remote access software, their systems did, indeed, allow for remote connections. In a letter to Senator Ron Wyden, Democrat from Oregon, written in April but only released this week, the company acknowledged that it had installed software that made the systems remotely accessible from anywhere. Prior to the inception of the Election Assistance Commission testing and certification program and the subsequent requirement for hardening, and at consumers' request, ES&S provided PC Anywhere remote connection software on the election management system workstation to a small number of customers between 2000 and 2006, wrote Tom Burt, ES&S president. According to Vice reporter Kim Zetter, the statement contradicts what the company told me about and fact checkers for a story I wrote for the New York Times in February. At that time, a spokesperson said ES&S had never installed PC Anywhere on any election system it sold. None of the employees, including long-tenured employees, has any knowledge that our voting systems have ever been sold with remote access software, the spokesperson said in February. However, this proved to be untrue. Wyden described this decision to install remote access software as, quote, the worst decision for security short of leaving ballot boxes on a Moscow street corner. For those who may be unfamiliar, PC Anywhere was remote access software by Symantec, which allowed people to remotely access other computers from anywhere in the world. In 2012, Symantec issued a press release telling all users to disable and uninstall the software after admitting that it had been hacked years prior in 2006. At the same time, ES&S was selling voting systems with PC Anywhere pre-installed on them. According to ES&S, the remote access software was so that the company could provide, quote, technical support purposes on county workstations. But this software was not designed to and did not come in contact with any voting machines. ES&S refused to elaborate on how many of the systems had the software. However, they claimed that they stopped using it after it was explicitly prohibited in 2007 by the EAC. Whether or not this is true remains a mystery, as the company has already proven that it will lie. According to Newsweek, ES&S has had several blunders in the past, including exposing the personal information of 1.8 million Illinois residents in 2017. And in 2011, when machines were flipping votes, meaning a voter would select one candidate, but a different one would be selected by the machine, which ES&S blamed on a calibration error. Voting in the U.S. is TFTP as consistently reported is rife with corruption and fraud. As the 2016 election illustrated, democracy is a sham, and those who count the votes, or at least claim to count the votes, decide the outcome. ES&S is not alone in the controversy either. In 2006, the documentary Hacking Democracy exposed Diebold and their role in rigging elections with their electronic voting machines. Clinton Eugene Curtis is an American attorney, computer programmer, and ex-employee of NASA and ExxonMobil, who exposed election hacking. Curtis is notable chiefly for making a series of whistleblower allegations about his former employer and about Republican Congressman Tom Feeney, including an allegation that in 2000, Feeney and Yang Enterprises requested Curtis's assistance in a scheme to steal votes by inserting fraudulent code into touchscreen voting systems. Curtis is seen in the video below testifying under oath in front of the U.S. House Judiciary members in Ohio. He tells the members how he was hired by Congressman Feeney in 2000 to build a prototype software package that would secretly rig an election to sway the results 51-49 to a specific side. After watching the video, you'll know why true change is hard to come by. Isn't that just precious?
Vote harder.
Yeah.
Oh my God. All right, let's unpack this. So, because we've got a few minutes still to do so. Right. So we've got a company which had installed on, we don't know how many machines of theirs, a remote access system, which back in 2008 had been recalled due to the fact that it was hacked. and needed to be uninstalled everywhere. And they thought this was permissible because reasons, and probably were paid to be able to tweak the numbers, because there's been plenty of evidence of it going on out there if people bother to look for it. It is out, particularly with Diebold. Their damn machines were notorious. I've seen the videos of it. You just have to program the chip and it'll give you a result. No matter what results come through, it'll record the result you want. You can program the machine to give you what you want. And to be quite frank, unless you're a very reputable, honest, decent person developing the software and you make it so that nobody can edit it except you as a person, there's a very high chance that somebody's going to get in the gears of one of those automated systems. It's inevitable. And this is part of the reason I think why Britain hasn't gone electronic with its electoral voting systems is, yes, it takes a while to count a paper ballot, but at least you know it's not going to be forged. You know it's not going to be tweaked by a piece of code. You know it's not going to be mucked about with in any way. You can't say that with electronic systems. It's not possible to say that unless they're 100% closed off, in which case, if they're broken, you have to replace the whole unit. And nobody's going to build something like that. It's too fragile. It's too brittle. And it'd be too expensive to make it right.
Well, right. And of course, the fact is that a lot of these systems are designed to be easily manipulable because, you know, effectively, if you can't do remote troubleshooting, you need to hire more bureaucrats and election, teams, essentially the people who go around with these boxes. They don't want to do that.
No, it's too expensive. I mean, nobody wants to.
Of course, it's not too expensive. They just don't want to spend their money on that. They'd rather spend it on fun money. And, let me be real specific. I've got another story I'm gonna sort of close out with that should be relatively sickening to anybody with children. That describes how they would rather spend their money.
Goody.
Yeah. Well, and you'll be fairly disgusted by it, I assume. But they don't want to spend their money on what they could spend it on and what would help, because they're too busy getting a surface level appearance of being ethical while being supremely unethical while they do it.
Oh yeah. I have no doubts on that one. It's a given in these things. Why spend the money on something that people actually need when you can have what you want as well?
Yeah. Right. So on that level, this is from AL.com, an Alabama website. I think one of the prime Alabama websites, if that doesn't sound like an oxymoron. There's not to say that there's anything wrong with Alabama, by the way, just that, fucking...
It's not Mississippi.
Right. But this site has this article. Police investigating allegation Alabama's beach house sheriff had sex with underage girls. Police are investigating Etowah County Sheriff Todd Entriken for allegedly having sex with underage girls during drug-fueled parties he hosted for fellow law enforcement officers and other adult men in the early 90s. A 41-year-old woman has detailed the claims during several hours of in-person interviews with AL.com in May, during which she alleged that Entriken had sex with her 4 times in the late summer of 1992 when he was 29 and she was 15 years old. In Alabama, the age of consent is 16. And I'm going to mispronounce this probably, but an Oneonta Police Department incident report filed later in May classified the woman's claims against Entriken as alleging second-degree rape. Entriken denied the allegations in a telephone interview Friday. I've never had sex with any 15-year-old girl or had drugs around or anything. I have never done drugs in my life, he said. That is the most absurd thing I've ever heard of. Never, ever has anything like that happened before. Mary
He
Elizabeth
thinks he
Cross,
Dr. Test too much.
right? Mary Elizabeth Cross, who grew up in Atala but currently lives in Tuscaloosa, says that she did not attempt to refuse Intrican's advances, but that she also personally watched him rape another underage girl who repeatedly said no. Intrican denied ever knowing Cross, who also goes by the name Elizabeth Williams and was born Mary Elizabeth Buckner, names he also said he did not recognize. The encounters allegedly took place in a camper on a piece of property Intrican still owns in Rainbow City, where Cross says he also provided her and other young girls with alcohol, cocaine, and cash on multiple occasions. Cross, who is now 41, alleges that Intrican knew she was underage when he had sex with her on 4 separate occasions over the course of 2 months while she was a student at Etowah High School. Intrican was commander of the Etowah County Sheriff's Office Drug Task Force at the time. Intrican gained a degree of national notoriety in March when AL.com exposed that over the past 3 years, he personally kept more than $750,000 in public funds allocated to feed inmates in the county jail he oversees. In September, Intrican purchased a $740,000 beach house in Oregon Beach, earning him the nickname Beach House Sheriff. AL is reporting on Cross's allegations for the first time following a 2-month investigation. She described the alleged encounters to AL.com reporter during hours-long drives across multiple Alabama counties in Oneonta Police Chief Charles Clifton's SUV on May 22nd and 24th, during which Clifton also questioned her in his capacity as a law enforcement official. The interviews were arranged within days of Clifton notifying an AL.com reporter that he had been made aware of a woman who said that Intrican had sex with her when she was a minor. Clifton pursued the claims after the Rainbow City Police Department declined to do so, and he recorded the allegations in the Oneonta Police Department incident report, which he filed on May 29th. Cross has also handwritten an official statement detailing her claims to the Oneonta Police. AL.com has obtained copies of both documents, neither of which have been released to the public. There's much more in this article, but basically that's the idea of this. And it looks like a relatively in-depth article too. Like, I saw relatively few bias points, even though it was specifically targeting somebody. So I would recommend people read that. It's on AL.com, and you can find out more about this particular story. And after I get your comments on that, we'll take a few of these chat comments that have popped up.
Fair enough. Well, yeah. Damn. I mean, Pedogate still, man. It's kicking about everywhere, isn't it? It's in every minor city, probably, and in every major city. And I'm not just talking about the States. If I'd have known you were going to do a cop pedophilia article, I'd have tried to find something on Dolphin House or that one cop in Britain who's been tirelessly championing for reform on child protection.
Well, hey, just bring something about those tomorrow. We'll follow up.
I'll do what I can. See if I can find it, because I saw a video testimony of the guy being deposed, basically, in I think it was IPCC or something. It was the police court, or the International Court for Human Rights or something like that. It was a fairly big deal, and his testimony was a bit eye-opening even for me. And this one is bad, but not surprising. It's when you get people in power, they tend to abuse it, unfortunately, if they can. And some people's outlets for abuse include children. And it's a dark and dangerous thing, and it's something that I speak out very harshly against on a regular basis. And it is real. It is a really systemic problem, and it's global. And a lot more needs to be done about it. And the start is to accept that there is a problem.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so a few of these comments, and then we'll wrap it up. Let me see. Finian Cornelson. Let's just we'll do this comment, and then we'll do Car's comment.
Okay.
Finian says, I loved that application talking about PC Anywhere. He says, I would use a smartphone to access my desktop. Worked very well. So he's familiar with the application, and in saying that, it's fairly telling, because you can recognize that basically anybody could have hacked this from anywhere with stuff that they could carry in their pocket. So that's and I knew this already, because I've watched a lot of these like Indian and Pakistani scammer videos where they expose them. He says it was super easy to use.
Yeah, I mean, to be quite frank, there's a common feature in all technology. If you've got good security, you have low access. If you've got good access, you've got low security.
Exactly.
And that's a feature of the design. And the problem is that if you want good security and good access, you gotta expect there to be some loopholes and ways for things to come in. So yeah, I'm not surprised he loved that program. It was a very useful program back in the day. Everybody loved it.
He says if they had the access code, it would be very easy. Don't have to be a code monkey hacker, in other words. A kid could do it. And a kid could definitely do it, especially if they had a brute force application. Those things are easy as fuck.
Yeah, all you need is a code.
And then Car Camp It, who runs Fagcast. Anybody who wants to check out an interesting podcast can check out Fagcast. It's Friends Against Government. He says, like clothes in Africa, with people sending clothes with charities, it completely tanks their clothing industry. And yes, absolutely. Like Tom's Shoes putting cobblers out of business, essentially. Like they did that. They put fucking cobblers out of business, and then suddenly people couldn't afford shoes to begin with. And then, fantastic, we're reliant on Tom's Shoes now for our fucking shoes.
Yeah, it's a typical problem. If you give things away in high volume, they become worthless. And the principle is true for goods, services, and money. So just be well aware of that. The more stuff you spend on that is effectively quote unquote free to you creates less value.
Nothing is free. Nothing can be free, and everything has a cost.
Yep.
And he says, unless you go for the current solution favorite, blockchain. Yeah, I can agree to that. I mean, because the blockchain has potential to be used on a very specific level all over the world. So,
well, it's a very brilliant system, and it has multiple purposes. It's not just a currency system; it's a full auditing trail, and the number of things that can use full audit are quite extensive. They are not trivial.
Yeah, and of course, when you end up with that system, you end up with essentially trustless worlds where you don't have to worry about somebody lying to you, because you can see it. Like, you can look into somebody's Steam wallet and see who talked to them via posts. You can see who sent them what, and possibly even why. And so in doing so, it removes like a lot of the potential for corruption for anybody who uses it. So yeah, it's very good.
Yeah.
Finian, last comment we'll take, says good security means zero access, completely offline. Then hand carry the files from the offline system to the online one. My wife loves those shoes. Haha. Well, if your wife ever needs a reason to not, just tell her to watch Poverty Incorporated. Say your long-haired hippie friend says that it's a very good movie to watch on that sort of thing. So, anyway, I think that pretty well wraps it up. And we'll see y'all tomorrow at same bat time, same bat channel. It's a pleasure to talk to you again, Lupinit, and I will talk to you, everybody on this channel tomorrow. This will be posted to Facebook relatively quickly, and on Friday, I'm going to invite every single one of my Facebook friends to like the page, so we should get some visibility.
Sweet.
Cool. And he says he'll show his wife Poverty Incorporated. So, and I think it's available on YouTube. And if it's not, it's the Prime membership is relatively cheap, and you definitely can watch it on Amazon Prime. Or you could just totally legally watch it on a streaming site that's totally legal online. Totally legally though. Never, I would never advocate doing anything the government says no to.
Of course not.
Anyway, see y'all tomorrow. And actually later today as well. And Finian might also be able to come to that one if I'm not mistaken, at least the last part of it. And yeah, I think that that wraps it up. See you actually then for Real News Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern time.
I'll see if I can make it, but
yeah,
no promises.
Yeah. Well, this has been bad morning news, and we will see y'all tomorrow for another episode. Be well.